Hey guys, Rukshan here and sharing some very disturbing news that we found out today regarding the voice to Parliament. And that is, of course, the involvement of Mark Zuckerberg, of course, by extension, Meta, and his army of fact checkers who are now pledging to fight misinformation and disinformation as it relates to the voice in participation with regulatory electoral authorities, in government authorities in Australia, as well as provide funding, a boost of funding to fact checkers like RMIT, Factlab, and so on that carry out this activist-style propagandistic fact checking that they do in Australia. Now, of course, this is all my opinion because I'm sure the fact checkers would love nothing more than to fact check my thoughts and opinions, because that's where we are heading in this country. And of all the things that we've been talking about with the voice to Parliament, and as this thing escalates to become more of a very important debate as we get closer to the date of the actual referendum, this involvement of Meta and Mark Zuckerberg and these so-called fact checkers should be ringing alarm bells and putting a major red flag up there for people to actually stand up now and pay attention to what is going on. Because as all of us as Australians who have seen over the last couple of years what fact checkers actually do, and what the involvement of companies like Meta actually means to the process of democracy and election integrity, based on people's opinions and just on real world evidence of things that have actually transpired, that Mark Zuckerberg himself has confirmed the complications with carrying out these type of fact check missions that they do. It is incumbent upon us now to realize that we cannot trust these fact checkers, we cannot trust Mark Zuckerberg, and we cannot trust the relationship between these foreign companies like Meta and the Australian government. We know that during the pandemic, Meta and the government were secretly liaising, banning Australian accounts, trying to shut down debate relating to the COVID pandemic, were sending out requests to take posts down. And a lot of these posts eventually, of course, turned out either to be not misinformation whatsoever. And in the most, worst examples, they turned out to actually be true information that the government was trying to hide from the people, because at the time they were abusing these systems that people didn't know that they were doing, right? So now we're learning now that Meta is actually taking a very keen interest in this and working very closely with government authorities as it relates to this particular referendum, and of course boosting funding and their global expertise to keep an eye on democracy in Australia. My God, if there was ever a reason for us to consider what the voice referendum means and the debates that we're going to be seeing online and the information that you're going to be seeing online from this day forward, knowing this, be very careful with what you're reading online and always think twice, and remember how many times these fact checkers, these companies like Meta and the government misled us and misinformed us now to our own detriment over the last couple of years. And I think this is actually going to boost the no vote, right? Because the last thing we want is these foreign companies involving themselves in the process of democracy in Australia. Let's have a read of this article from The Guardian, who had an exclusive interview with this Meta representative from Australia. And let's just kind of see what they're up to. Meta vows to crack down on abuse and misinformation surrounding voice to Parliament referendum. Exclusive. Parent company of Facebook, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, says it will ensure content on its platforms is contributing to democracy. I think these platforms should just stay the hell out of it. Instead, they don't need to contribute or whatever to anything, because we've seen how many times they've caused problems by trying to stick their foot in things where they shouldn't be. Facebook and Instagram want to be contributing to democracy and not exacerbating harm surrounding the Indigenous voice referendum, the company's Australian policy head has said, as the social media giant beefs up protections on misinformation, abuse, and mental health before the national vote. Meta, the parent company of the two apps, on Monday announced it would boost funding to fact checkers monitoring misinformation, activate global teams to locate and respond to potential threats to the referendum, including coordinated inauthentic behaviour, and form a partnership with Reach Out for mental health support to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The company will also maintain transparency tools, such as its ad library that tracks political spending. Anyway, you get the idea. So they're going to be giving funds to these fact checkers like RMIT Factlab, these propagandists, so-called fact checkers that I believe are just activists who have a particular political leaning and are using this very modern system of shady style censorship. Again, in my opinion, I don't rate fact checking, and I'm going to go into the reasons as to why I don't do that, because we have some court rulings and so on, which shows you that fact checking is nothing more than a sham. It's just a complete scam. But they are receiving money, a boost, an undisclosed amount. Who knows how much they're getting from Meta, how much this actually is a whirlwind for them. Who knows how much money they're getting for doing this. And it's very interesting. You might have never thought that, because if you go to RMIT's website, for instance, these companies, sorry, I just landed on the acknowledgement to country on their website. RMIT University acknowledges the people of the Wu Wurrung and Boon Wurrung languages group of the Eastern Kulin Nation, on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of the university. So yes, RMIT just has the acknowledgement to country on their fact-checking website. This is the organisation which will be fact-checking the Voice to Parliament stuff that's happening in Australia. So anyway, RMIT Factlab, these guys come across as independent, and they probably are independent or whatever, in whatever fact check language that they've put together for this. But all they do in the last couple of months, they've spent a lot of time actually looking over the Voice to Parliament. And if you think that they're fact-checking like the Labor government, or they're fact-checking like Linda Burney and the things that she's saying, they're asking people to be provided with more information, all this kind of stuff. No, I mean, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but most of these fact checks are against the No campaign on some very, debatable points, in my opinion. Very debatable things. For instance, people sometimes will say that the Voice to Parliament is racist, and sometimes that is their opinion, based on the understanding that we are going to have a separate advisory body just for one particular ethnic or race-based group. Regardless of what, even though they're just giving advice, the fact is that no other ethnic or race group in Australia has this separate advisory group. We're all one. We're all Australians in that respect. So now we have this referendum where we're going to be voting on a particular set of people, Indigenous, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander Australians, having this separate advisory body that is based on their ethnic and racial characteristics to be in that club. So yes, there is an element of race in there, and some people argue that it is racist. And fair enough in my mind. For these type of debates, people need to argue about this topic. But we know that RMIT in the past has fact-checked this, right? So proposed Indigenous Voice to Parliament will not confer special rights to one race of people. What was claimed? The Indigenous Voice to Parliament will provide special rights to one race of people in Australia. False. That's their verdict. The verdict is false. Legal and constitutional experts say that the proposed Voice to Parliament will not provide anyone with special rights, but rather provide an opportunity to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to make representations to Parliament on matters that impact them. See, it's not special that this advisory body that they're getting, it's not special. It's nothing unique or special. So it's not different to what's existing now. This is what they're trying to convince you of a statement which, when you read it, it sounds like exactly what the what the actual claim is. Correct? I mean, am I going crazy looking at this stuff? There is an element there that this particular group of people, this particular racial or ethnic group, will have a opportunity to make representations to Parliament. Okay, so it is something that is distinct and separate. So if people want to argue about whether that's racist or not for this actual particular debate, those arguments should be allowed to happen. And I think it's very dangerous if people are concerned about these things and talking about these things online, on these platforms, all of a sudden you have these activist-style propagandists from these Factlab organizations putting a sticker on it or making sure that those posts can't be discussed or they don't get seen by people. They're hidden. That debate is hidden by these fact checkers. That is what they're doing. And that is not how these elections or these referendums should be run with this type of interference. Because I kid you not, there would be Indigenous people, Aboriginal people, and I have seen this online as well, that say that this is actually racist. They don't want to be this separate thing. They feel it's racist, right? But even those voices are being silenced by these people who are so hell-bent on giving this delusional take of their own, based on the experts and the legal things for something that many people also still claim that we don't actually know exactly what's going to happen because the details that have been provided are very vague. And even we've seen Anthony Albanese himself struggling on multiple occasions on television and press conferences, struggling to exactly explain what all of this is about. Now, the fact checkers, of course, will provide context and they will tell you that there's this Uluru Statement from the Heart, there's this document, they've had these working groups, and all types of nonsense. But we don't actually 100%. I'm being very careful here because of these fact check clowns. We don't 100% know how this will all play out in terms of what these things will be advising on, what the limits are, how Parliament will interact with them, will it end up in court system? All these things are kind of up in the air. So I think it's valid that people are allowed to debate and discuss these topics and learn from it, and that will inform the way that they choose to vote. What do you guys think? And look, going back to Mark Zuckerberg, this is Zuckerberg on the Joe Rogan show when asked about their involvement with this Hunter Biden laptop story, which was shut down during the 2020 election. We were told by all these these shady news organizations, these shady fact checkers online, that this was not a true story. It was all false. It was Russian disinformation and all this kind of nonsense, right? And Facebook, Meta, were all up in that, involved in that. So let's have a look at what his answer to Joe Rogan was when he was confronted on this.
How do you guys handle things when they're a big news item that's controversial? Like there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York Post.
Yeah, we had that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. Basically the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. So our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did.
So just in that, you can hear the FBI came to them. They were fed this information. So they're working with the FBI in secret, of course, during that time. They're getting this information. Just like now, they're working with the Australian Electoral committees, whatever their authorities, and getting this information about what is right, what is wrong. But now we know today, we know this for sure, that the FBI was sitting on the Hunter Biden laptop for all this time. They knew that it wasn't false. All of that stuff that was spread during that time was just like disinformation, misinformation to confuse everyone so the story wouldn't get out till after the election, which we now, of course, we openly discuss it and look at Hunter Biden, the crackhead son of Joe Biden, and we've seen all the crap that's come out of his laptop. And potentially, yeah, that could have changed the outcome of that election. But Facebook, at that time, Twitter, under Jack Dorsey, I believe, these companies were heavily involved in censoring information. So you see how dangerous it is, people like Mark Zuckerberg, and why we have to now be mindful of his increased involvement in the Voice to Parliament referendum, because these guys, they are either dumb, okay, they're either stupid or they know what's going on. Okay, this is my opinion. They're either dumb or they willfully knew what was going on. I mean, there's only two explanations for what's happening here. And this is like a smart guy, apparently, billionaire. He's done all these things in his life, and he's acting like dumb in terms of what's happened here. and when it's so obvious to everyone else what's going on here. So when these guys start playing dumb, we got to be careful. So they're a bit shady. And of course, who can forget during COVID how many people were fact-checked, how many posts were removed, how much things were termed as misinformation and disinformation. And we know through certain freedom of information requests now that the Australian government had a secret little hotline with companies like Facebook and Twitter at that time. And they were sending off emails saying, remove this post, remove this group, do this, do that, right? They were doing that as a secret relationship, and they were censoring the voices of Australians and shutting down debate. And today, we can unequivocally say on many of those occasions, the information that people were sharing was actually factual, accurate information that was called disinformation and misinformation by the government at that time. So it's very dangerous, the power that these companies wield, particularly when they get into bed with government. But let's listen to Zuckerberg's. I was about to call him Zuckerberg because Elon Musk called him a cuck today, which was quite hilarious. Excuse my language, but let's have a listen to him explaining how they dealt with misinformation during COVID. And you can again listen to this and just think about how dangerous it is now that these same clowns are involved in our electoral process with the referendum in terms of controlling online speech.
So misinformation, I think, has been a really tricky one because there are things that are kind of obviously false, right, that are maybe factual, but may not be harmful. So it's like, all right, are you going to censor someone for just being wrong? It's, if there's no kind of harm implication of what they're doing, I think there's a bunch of real kind of issues and challenges there. But then I think that there are other places where it is, just take some of the stuff around COVID earlier on in the pandemic, where there were, real health implications, but there hadn't been time to fully vet a bunch of the scientific assumptions. And, unfortunately, I think a lot of the kind of establishment on that, kind of waffled on a bunch of facts and, asked for a bunch of things to be censored that in retrospect ended up being, more debatable or true. And that stuff is really tough, right? And really undermines trust in that. And
yeah, so you can hear this guy is confused on that, or he's pretending to be confused. It's really tough. Sorry, we took down all that information, even though we weren't sure at the time. But we just did what we thought we had to do because of all the pressure around us, and it's a bit too late now. Now that we know that it's all true, I mean, complete nonsense. Now, of course, COVID misinformation or disinformation.
So misinformation, I think,
is not the same as as it relates to an election process. But we know Mark Zuckerberg has himself funded election style things before to increase transparency and democracy. And this is something that Meta does get their hands in. And we know that during the 2020 election, they donated hundreds of millions of dollars, Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, to certain civic organizations. And we're not sure exactly how that money was funneled and how it was used, but we know it ended up a lot with the Democrats. And in this instance, we have the Labor Party in Victoria, who are the government in Australia, the government of the day, is heavily invested in the voice to Parliament. They want it to go ahead. It's their core election promise, one of their core election promises, to have this referendum. They want this. And, if we now we know that the government, the Liberal government previously during the COVID time, was secretly working with Facebook. Now we have the Labor government openly working with them. What is that going to lead to? But let's have a look at some of Mark's other election style work.
In 2020, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg and his wife contributed $350 million to the Center for Tech and Civic Life, or CTCL, money that was then given to local boards of election nationwide. CTCL claimed its grants were nonpartisan and simply aimed at underwriting safe elections during a pandemic. But was that really CTCL's agenda? In March 2020, former Obama campaign manager David Plouffe was employed by Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan. That month, he published a book in which he wrote that the 2020 election would be a, quote, block-by-block street fight. So Democrats needed to turn out their urban base, particularly in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan. That is exactly what CTCL did. In Wisconsin, Zuckerberg and CTCL spent approximately $47 per voter in known Democratic districts, and only about $7 per voter in Republican districts.
You get the idea. It's very interesting, isn't it, Zuckerberg and his love of democracy. And now we have Zuckerberg's involvement in Australia. But, let's not forget that Facebook themselves are a very dubious organizations known for privacy breaches and data harvesting. Now, we know in this New York Post article here, Facebook spied on private messages of Americans who questioned 2020 election. Facebook has been spying on the private messages and data of American users and reporting them to the FBI if they express anti-government or anti-authority sentiments or question the 2020 election, according to sources within the Department of Justice. Under the FBI collaboration operation, somebody at the Facebook red flagged these supposedly submersive private messages over the past 19 months and transmitted them in redacted form to the Domestic Terrorism Operation Unit at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. without a subpoena. It was done outside the legal process and without probable cause, alleged one of the sources who spoke on conditions of anonymity. Facebook provides the FBI with private conversations which are protected by the First Amendment without any subpoena. So yes, Facebook can see everything, and who knows, do they have the remit or the presence of mind to be monitoring Australians around this particular issue? Who knows what they're up to? Can we really trust them? I had another article loaded up here as well, which is Facebook admits the truth. Fact checks are really just lefty opinion. Facebook finally admitted the truth that fact checks that social media use to police what Americans read and watch are just opinion. That's thanks to a lawsuit brought by celebrated journalist John Stossel, which has exposed the left's supposed battle against misinformation as a farce. Stossel posted a pair of videos that touched the third rail of the liberal politics, climate change. Neither questioned whether climate change is real, but each talked about other issues, namely forest management and using technology to adapt. Yet the third-party fact-check Facebook contradicts to review these pieces. Science feedback flagged them as false or our favorite, lacking context. Right? So it's not always these false fact checks that they do. They love doing these missing context fact checks because it's very vague then. They can flag an article, they can reduce the distribution and just say, oh, look, it's not false, but it's missing the correct content, so therefore we're going to stop the distribution of this content. Very shady. But what happened then was, when sued, Facebook throws up its hands and says, not our problem, his real beef is with science feedback. You see, we wash our hands of it. As for the fact-check label we slapped on your piece, in Facebook's response to Stossel, it argues, well, that's protected opinion under the First Amendment. So yes, if you ever see people saying that Facebook fact-checkers are actually not distinctly relying on this principle of accurate, truthful facts, they are in fact depending on their opinion of what the facts are. This is why this particular court case. So what do you guys think? Do you want these dodgy folks at Facebook involved in our referendum? I think it sets up all types of alarm bells in my head. And look, this is the director here, Russell Skelton, the director of RMIT Factlab, this guy. And interestingly, I went on his Twitter just to have a look at what he's been up to. And he just, randomly shared an article from Marcia Langton, one of the voice, proponents, one of the major people supporting the Voice to Parliament, one of these activist-style Indigenous people that are fully involved in pushing the Voice to Parliament. And he just happened to share that article, fighting for a voice. So it's interesting, the director of RMIT Factlab, these people getting funded now, who knows to how much in dollar values, we don't know, it's undisclosed. Maybe they should tell the people, maybe RMIT Factlab, because, we have these kind of connections and the articles that they're sharing. Maybe they should tell the people of Australia how much they're getting from Facebook. And is this the first time that they're receiving money from Facebook or these type of companies to conduct their so-called independent fact-checking? Very interesting, and this is an organization, RMIT Factlab, that actually solicits donations from the public to support their efforts. Right, they're soliciting people's money. These grifters, right? Grifters, grifting RMIT, taking people's money because they don't have the funds through screwing over students for all sorts of uni fees to fund their fact checking operation that they ask for donations. Well, it turns out that they also receive all sorts of funding from the social media companies. Isn't that interesting, huh? Very interesting. Maybe it's all above board. Who knows? Anyway, guys, I've kind of waffled on a little bit there, but I wanted to give you a full breakdown of RMIT and, what they're up to, what Meta is up to. This voice referendum is really kind of getting into becoming a very serious topic now when you see the type of involvement happening from these foreign companies like Meta and Mark Zuckerberg. And I'm really going to start paying attention to this stuff now and trying to hold these people accountable because I don't trust them. I don't trust Mark Zuckerberg. I don't trust these, so-called fact checkers. I reckon a lot of them are just dubious. In my opinion, they're mostly just clowns, activists, and propagandists, and they are undermining. Again, in my opinion, these processes and things that they get involved in is actually undermining our democratic systems, and it's incumbent upon us again to fight this and actually make people aware of this. So even if you are sharing information with people, do it. You don't have to always do it through your Facebook or Instagram. You can message them privately, call them up, talk to them, and then tell them how it is. All right, guys, that's it for today. If you're enjoying my videos, you can follow along on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Threads, Rumble, Odyssey, and I think that's all of them. Anyway, at The Real Rukshan or Rukshan Fernando. See you next time.